Global Intifada, bringing you current affairs through revolutionary and protest music from around the world.
Every Thursday afternoon from 5 till 6 on 3CR.
Because music is our bomb.
This is a message from Global Intifada on 3CR 8:55 AM. Punk, hip-hop and other forms of political music provide tools for the systematically silenced to articulate themselves and speak back to the system. Political music is a resistive art form, and subsequently this music may contain confronting themes and explicit language. If this is likely to offend you, tune out now. Thank you for listening.
When I was a girl, I wanted to grow up to be a prostitute. I'm sure some of you are thinking, bullshit, nobody wants to grow up to be a prostitute. Well, I didn't when I was in primary school, but about 2 years into high school, yes, I did. By then, I'd started to become more consciously aware of the disgust I held for most of society. I felt like I just didn't fit in. I mean, school, just for starters. It felt like I was being groomed for a life to accept the authority of petty tyrants enforcing rules that made little sense. I was into animal liberation, and I couldn't make sense of how all these people around me who claimed to love animals thought that industrial animal torture was perfectly normal. The sexism all around me, harassment every single day, in my home, on the TV, sexism everywhere, the blatant racism, all this small-mindedness. The future just sort of laid out ahead of me. It looked like, to me at the time, it looked like death by 1,000 cuts to the soul if the boredom and tedium didn't kill me first. When I was about 14, we lived around the corner from an upmarket brothel, and I'd see the women enter and leave, and they looked so glamorous and confident, and they seemed to me to be living the perfect fuck you kind of lives. By then I was sexually active and getting paid for sex. It just seemed like a smart thing. And around the same time, my sister and I were walking down the street, and this random man offered my sister and I $50, which was quite a sum back then, if we could stand on him while he just laid down on the nature strip with all these cars going past. If we could stand on his torso for more than 5 seconds without falling off. This was like a lightning bolt. I mean, who doesn't want easy money? And if a lot of men are this desperate and easy to please, get out the pen and sign me up. Needless to say, upper echelon brothels weren't in my destiny. As my tastes refined, I found myself drawn to the tawdry glamour of the less salubrious establishments and houses of ill repute. The kind of places other people would walk by and wonder what kind of people could possibly work there. They were the places that made me intensely curious and sought initiation into. The thrill of working on the street just near the breathtaking, amazing trans women on William Street, Sydney, some of whom have now passed into legend, was thrilling. And the camaraderie amongst us, it felt really special and precious. Street working, it was a little scary at first. Like all first times when you transgress a boundary and you push yourself really out of your comfort zone, but that transgression can feel so incredibly liberating and exciting, and it certainly wasn't dull. Even getting arrested by the then infamous Sydney Vice Squad and having them warn me off sex work because in their experience it turns nice young girls like me into lesbians. It was hilarious. I had to control myself so much to not be pissing myself with laughter. That's not to minimise the brutality of the Sydney Vice Squad at the time, though. I mean, they were assholes. They made it clear that should I continue after my first arrest, they'd allow me to work as long as I gave them freebies. They told me I should get back out in the street that night to raise money for my fine. Needless to say, I never paid that fucking fine. So anyway, then it was back to the brothels, the fabulously seedy strip joints, resplendent with their garish kitsch decor, the peep shows and the BDSM houses with interiors designed to intimidate even the most seasoned punters. I never worked terribly hard. I worked the bare minimum I could get away with, really. And hell, I don't even think I was probably that good at it. I'd make just enough money to support myself. I always kept my heroin habit to a minimum in line with my ethos to work as little as possible. It was easy money, and being a junkie whore was exactly what I wanted to be. And it was fun. I had so much fun at that time, and it gave me the time for all the stuff that I was interested in doing. So much of my life was like a big party, squatting with my friends, building community, learning more about living outside the system, making mischief, and it afforded me the time to devote as many hours as I wanted to studying whatever interested me. But like anything you're doing, if you do it long enough, it develops into a tedium. It's in my past now. I'm older, but those choices I made to do prostitution made me who I am now. A proud, unrepentant ex-junkie whore who is still at war with almost every value this foul, hypocritical, capitalist society espouses. It's hugely shaped my anarchism. My anarchism embraces social war, unlike the male-dominated workerist anarchist strains espoused by the largely socially conservative and respectability-seeking reformists who dominate the Australian anarchist landscape. I'm proud that I stood firmly in that space in which reviled women stand, and along with other genders. I've always despised work culture, the professionalism of tasks with all its attendant hierarchies and petty competitiveness, along with the pathetic class judgments over what one does. So it was my good fortune to escape that nonsense most of my working life and have colleagues who stood alongside me outside of society. A refrain I've heard some sex worker activists say is, "Of course no girl wants to grow up to be a sex worker." Well, they don't speak for me. In fact, a lot of what sex worker activists say doesn't resonate with me, especially when it comes to making sex work respectable. I'm all for decriminalisation. I mean, the less cops you have to deal with, the better, right? However, increasingly, sex worker organisations are seeking to destigmatise sex work, so much so that it's like they want it to be respected by the mainstream in the same way as, say, a professional masseuse or therapist is. Call me weird, but the winning of the right to pay fucking tax is not my idea of liberation. Some of us want to live in the margins. How can sex workers evolve politically to oppose this capitalist, patriarchal, colonial, fucked up system we're living in if their primary concern is being socially accepted by this very same system? If you work with a sex worker organisation, try and influence them to not fear the non-respectable sex work positions and political political actions. We don't all have to have the one voice. So, as a proud ex-whore, I implore younger sex workers to reject the building of their social capital. Embrace your rejection of mainstream society. Radicalise yourselves as fully as you can. Question all the political and social values we've been indoctrinated into. Read politically radical texts. Get together with your fellow outcasts and make trouble and cause mischief and fuck shit up. Be proud to be a card-carrying member of society's beautiful and brave rejects. For it's in the margins of society we not only live, love, dance and fight, but this is our true power, living in the margins. The most effective enemies of the state are those with nothing to lose. And once we lose it all, we have the whole world to gain.
When we go to glory, the purpose will stand the ruins. When we understand the true reform does occur, we have got to act and pretend new, as same as you.
Good afternoon and welcome to this week's issue of Music for the Global Intifada on 3CR 855 AM. As that introductory statement from anonymous Comrade X suggested, the theme of today's show focuses on International Whores Day, an annual event celebrated internationally on the 2nd of June, which is credited with instigating the international sex worker movement. In the spirit of the whores of Lyon, whose courage and praxis we acknowledge in the annual celebration and recognition of International Whores Day, the content of this program may be deemed contentious, subversive, or overly critical to sex workers with an investment in some mainstream sex worker movements and or sex workers which do not share a radical political perspective. If you are likely to be offended, we urge you not to tune out for the next hour, rather to remain tuned in, as it is to you to whom we present our collective challenges to the orthodoxies surrounding sex work narratives. This episode of Music for the Global Intifada was born from a collective frustration at the unchallenged respectability politics and the platformist tendencies normalized by many sex worker reform groups around the world. Our issue is not so much with the general demands of the sex worker movement. From our own experiences, we recognize the many benefits to decriminalizing sex work. Rather, the respectability and assimilationist strategies, particularly by state-funded sex worker organizations, fail to include, and some would argue, deliberately exclude the most marginalized, criminalized, and morally reviled prostitutes, usually those of us who are the most visible, living street-based lives, injecting currently illicit drugs, perhaps living with an aversion to the homogeny of domesticity, and or unashamedly providing sexual services which challenge dominant heteronormative sexual service provision. Due to the criminalized and highly visible nature of our work, many of us don't have the privilege of living double lives. We experience stigma, discrimination, and dehumanization in a plethora of ways, many of which would not even be considered by professional and careerist self-described high-class sex workers. Further, many of us fail to share the stale moral values of the inherently sick system we are forced to endure. In fact, many of us outright reject the system and aren't seeking to reform it with the aim of creating a more palatable oppression. Herein lies further issues we have with many state-funded sex worker organizations. The fact that International Whores Day is now referred to as International Sex Workers Day bears testament to the assimilationist tendencies of many state-funded sex worker organizations and is reflective of the inherent desire for social acceptance Comrade X previously mentioned. Aspirations to be included in the respectable and noble right to pay tax, take out a mortgage, or to contribute to earth-raping superannuation funds. With the rebranding of the 2nd of June, traditionally referred to with pride and unyielding respect as International Whores Day, to the less confrontational and contentious International Sex Workers Day, the acknowledgement that Lyon's women prostitutes undertook a direct action and civil disobedience campaign is seemingly diluted, and the radical beginnings of the sex worker movement are dangerously open to historical revisionism. For the whores of Lyon, there were no polite, grovelling government submissions for these transgressive and courageous women. On the 2nd of June, 1975, more than 100 prostitutes occupied the Catholic Saint Nitzia Church in Lyon, France, as a response to ongoing police violence, arrest, harassment, police-instigated closure of hotels women worked in with peace and security, and threats to arrest the intimate partners of prostitutes for living off the immoral earnings of women, a law still enforced in some jurisdictions of so-called Australia. A banner was hung from the church steeple reading, "Our children don't want their mothers in prison." In response to this banner, the state threatened to remove the children of the occupying whores if they failed to leave the church premises. Of course they refused. Additionally, the occupying whores demanded an end to police-issued fines and the release from prison of 10 women who had been locked up several days earlier for so-called soliciting. Again, a so-called crime which is still used in various jurisdictions of so-called Australia. In fact, it's used traditionally the world over. Soliciting is merely an interpretation by police that any women in public without what is considered a reasonable cause may be proposing random men for sex. The women also demanded local police investigate a series of brutal murders committed against their community, having previously been told by police that they had more important work to tend to than investigating serial killings of prostitutes. Seemingly not a dissimilar response to the unsolved murders of 7 street-based whores in St Kilda since 1990, the last victim being Tracy Connolly. During the days of early June 1975, hundreds of whores across the country occupied a total of 5 French churches during the strike. Many more of the approximate 20,000 French prostitutes nationwide downed tools in solidarity with the occupying whores. The striking workers sang political chants and demanded decent working conditions and an end to stigma.
When we occupy the churches, you are scandalized. Religious bigots, you who threatened us with hell. We have come to eat at your table at San Nazir. When we
occupy the churches, you are scandalized, religious bigots. You who threatened us with hell, we have come to eat at your table at Saint Nitzia.
When we occupy the churches, you are scandalized, religious bigots. You who threatened us with hell, we have come to eat at your table at Saint Nitzia.
When we occupy the churches, you are scandalized, religious bigots. You who threatened us with hell, we've come to eat at your table at Saint Nitzia. Religious bigots, you who threatened us with hell, we have come to eat at your table at San Nazir.
The occupation, which lasted for 8 days, resulted in an incredible and unprecedented outpouring of solidarity for the occupying whores. Local parish priests refused to call the police to remove the women. Local people supported the women and bought clothes and food, and a large number of non-prostitute women were so outraged by the state's threat to remove the children of the protesting whores that they joined the occupation, stating, "How can you tell which of us is and which of us is not a prostitute? Either you take all our children into state welfare or you take none of them." However, acting on government orders, the police forcibly and violently cleared the St. Nitzia Church after 8 days on the 10th of June 1975. Similar violent police evictions across other churches in Paris, Marseille, Grenoble, Saint-Étienne, and Montpellier soon followed. Unfortunately, in the intervening years since 1975, this radical action, its unprecedented support and solidarity from local people, and credit as the birth of the international sex worker rights movement, has progressively become less subversive and much more adverse to risk-taking in campaigning. Hence, in producing today's show, we are exploring both the radical history of activism related to prostitution, including highlighting actions by whores who have engaged in creative, confrontational, and controversial forms of activism as an antidote in lieu of polite appeals to governments to engage in law reform processes. In recognizing the importance of creating social histories which reflect our experiences of operating on the margins of not just the injustice system and the mainstream sex worker movement, today's content will focus specifically on celebrating the activism undertaken by prostitutes who have openly embraced illegalist life and work choices, namely injecting drug users, street-based workers, genderqueer whores, and esoteric sex workers. Many of us identify as anarchists, and to contextualize the radical histories of prostitution, particularly in relation to anarchist history, is the little-known fact that Emma Goldman, deservedly one of the most famous women anarchists of the 20th century, was intimately involved in the sex industry, herself working as a whore for a short period in an attempt to fundraise for revolutionary purposes. Similarly, as she was often pursued by the state, she regularly sought shelter in brothels, where many of her ideas surrounding the exploitative nature of marriage, access to women's birth control, free love, and homosexuality were directly influenced.
When we occupy the churches, you are scandalized. Religious bigots, you who threatened us with hell. We have come to eat at your table at Saint Nazaire.
When we occupy the churches, you are scandalized, religious bigots. You who threatened us with hell, we have come to eat at your table at Saint Nazaire.
When we occupy the churches, you are scandalized, religious bigots. You who threatened us with hell, we have come to eat at your table at Saint Nazaire.
When we occupy the churches, you are scandalized, religious bigots. You who threatened us with hell, we've come to eat at your table at Saint Nazaire. Religious bigots, you who threatened us with hell, we have come to eat at your table at Saint Nazaire.
To the moralist, prostitution doesn't consist so much in the fact that a woman sells her body, but rather that she sells it out of wedlock. Free love, as if love can be anything but free. It can't live in no other atmosphere. Marriage, on the other hand, incapacitates a woman for life's struggle, annihilates her social consciousness, and paralyzes her imagination. What's really the cause of the trade in women? Exploitation, of course. It's merely a question of degree whether she sells herself to one man, in or out of marriage, or to many men. The worst prostitutes this world knows are of the male gender, and in the main are found in editorial chairs and in pulpits misnamed Christian, defending a system of society which they know is rotten, a system which makes a decent living, especially for women, very difficult.
Although her book, The Traffic in Women, published in 1910, may not reflect the current discourse on prostitution, Emma Goldman was certainly one of the first anarchist women to address prostitution in a way that was supportive of whores. Unlike the CNT in Spain, whose forced liberation of women working in brothels during the Spanish Civil War no doubt had adverse and unintended consequences not considered by the earnest and morally uptight anarcho-syndicalists of the day, ironically, who opposed prostitution as part of a wider effort related to women's emancipation, no matter how a woman chooses to use her own body, of course. However, that's an issue for another day. In celebration of the radical spirit of International Whores Day, we are fortunate to have guests, PhD Ali Murray and Mistress Anya, founders of the Queer and Esoteric Workers Union, to talk about the reasons they began their particularly creative, self-funded activist group in response to marginalization from funded sex worker networks in the 1990s.
G'day, this is Ali here, one of the first original people who set up the Queer and Esoteric Workers Union in about 1991-92 in Sydney, because we were pretty jacked off with the way that, that the original sex worker orgs set up in the 80s, mostly junkies pretty much, and then once the funding came in with the AIDS, then that was all out the window. We all got to go all mainstream and straight up and bullshit like that. And when we couldn't get it through their heads that we got to stick up for who we are and fuck the money, then we set up our own group. So Queer and Esoteric Workers Union, here we go. So we were basically a bunch of junkies. Started with me and Mistress Anna, Sydney, then a whole bunch of other people, Sydney, Canberra, Melbourne, sort of heavily into the drugs and BDSM work, basically. And I mean queer as in, just queer. I think to be a sex worker is inherently queer. It's just the nature of the thing. Anyway, I started in sex work back in the early 80s when I was a young PhD student in Jakarta, very short of money, and just drifted into the scene of the bars in Block M. And that was so much fun, those were the days. It's all gone now. In Indonesia, it's changed a lot. And anyway, I came back and I worked in Indonesian studies at Sydney Uni, and then got involved with the struggle of the East Timorese. I went there with one of my best mates, Kamal, and he got shot dead by the Indonesian military. And needless to say, I was pretty pissed off about that. And the uni just would not back me up. So I left the uni, went into sex worker rights organisations, worked at the Sex Worker Outreach Project in Sydney. And that's where I met Mistress Anna and a few other people, and we just started getting upset that they just weren't acknowledging the drug use and the need to change the laws around drug use.
So the QU was started when we were involved with SWAP, and I guess you are the early version. And for me, it was about the issue that once some of these organisations get some credibility, they felt as though they wanted to marginalise people within their group, and that made them, they thought, appear squeaky clean. So the people they decided to marginalise were B&D, S&M workers, but particularly injecting drug users of all sorts, but particularly IDU. Now, the thing is that this was just a pathetic attempt to make sex workers appear squeaky clean and as though they were these wonderful members of society. Now, we are wonderful members of society, but by marginalising people within our group, that doesn't make us any better. That makes us worse. By trying to say that this group, what's the point in making sex work appear like it's fantastic if we're not also supporting every single person within the whole diaspora? So injecting drug users are a major part of the sex worker community. There is no denying that. What we need to be doing is we need to be getting drug use legalised, and then we will find our squeaky cleanness because we're not doing anything wrong. This is what these organisations were not saying, they were not supporting, and they were marginalising within the margins. And what this causes is suicide and major depression, because people who are already marginalised, and then they are marginalised even further within these marginal groups, it can be extremely depressing and extremely hard to feel as though you keep going if your group, your community, is not even supporting you and is in fact saying that, look, we're not like these people are the problem. And that's not the problem. The problem is the laws, and the problem is society's attitudes. So as a group, we need to support each other and everybody within the group, in particular the people who are on the margins, because it's not making anybody any better to say that you are different or better than any other group. So in terms of some of the actions that the QU took, we produced a magazine called Prozine, and it was distributed, and it was basically about the difference between the Q and Esoteric Workers Union and other sex worker orgs, and how we were supporting both BND, S&M and IDU drug users.
We did a whole lot of stuff, a lot of performance. One of the biggest things, Mardi Gras Parade, about 1996, when we had a homemade sort of chariot out of scrap metal, pulled along by a bunch of slaves that Mistress Anna did some absolutely incredible rope bondage on them, and they pulled Anna up the road all the way along. It was just incredible night, shocked a lot of people. Got cut out of the ABC presentation of the night, but it's still there somewhere in the file.
So some of the other things that we did, probably one of our most successful, was we did the first BND float in Mardi Gras, and we had a big scrap metal chariot, and I was the mistress, or sitting up in the chariot being pulled along by a whole bunch of slaves who were in rope bondage that we'd done, and we had a few people, Mistress Erica Red, who was sitting on the front with sort of a 3-foot tall purple dildo, and it was very much all of the people who were involved in IDU politics as well as sex worker politics. So it was very much our sort of marginal group that had been marginalised even further from within the sex worker organisations.
And we took QU to a whole lot. We were a member of Scarlet Alliance, so we went to all the conferences over the years, ran workshops, about BDSM, about drug use, queer stuff, all of that.
Because basically what happened was while sex work was decriminalised within New South Wales, they left behind the most marginalised group of people within sex work industry. So that's basically what QU was about, trying to right that wrong, and also just showing people that there's a hell of a lot of talent and amazing creative people who don't deserve to be thrown off into the dirt and be treated as though they are less than, because none of us are. Everybody is worthy of being treated with respect and having their lives validated. Don't forget, it's not very long since drug use was made illegal, and for many, 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 many thousands of years it was perfectly legal in pretty much every human society. It has been used, including our current one, even though they only acknowledge alcohol and tobacco as being the legal ones. They just happen to be the most dangerous and deadly.
Feel free to ask about that. And we also went overseas to a few conferences and performances. One of those was Berlin.
The thing is that Ali took me to Berlin, and she'll talk a little bit about festivals. There was a lot of art, a lot of poetry, and a lot of demonstrations. We went to and continue to go to.
Can't exactly remember the name of it. I know it had Kunst in the title. Anyway, me and Sue and Deej and Emma, we took an amazing set of stuff over there. Performances, poetry, all sorts of stuff. So I'd like to read you one of the poems that we read over there while we were gyrating on stage naked, with having pictures of our cunts taken up our vaginas and then blown up absolutely massive and displayed on our naked bodies, while Sue, I think, was roving around with a giant strap on. So this is called Some Johns. Some Johns are so stupid, some are so far gone. Some Johns think they can fuck all night. I just can't fake it that long. So give me all your money, give me all your dough. Paper wraps up stone, rubbers come and go. American Johns say, you're a good person, hey, I wish you luck. Aussie Johns say, wow, great muscle control. Where'd you learn to fuck? Japanese Johns say, booty pull, please, you get cocksuck. Some Johns ask for kinky things. Some dicks are really funny, but I try not to giggle 'cause I really need the money.
Idiots. All of them. Now there's a man, the living tool of Satan. He charges forth while others are debating. Conniving, cocky knave with all the trimmings. I know one thing will bring him down. It's women. And women he meets a deep authority. In them he feels his own dependency. He sniggers at the good book, mocks the prison prim, does anything for pay if it will pay. And since he knows what ladies do to him, he thrusts them well out of his way. All through the day he swears he's self-denying. Then dusk descends and once again he's lying. They're all the same in median love's confusion. Poor noble souls get blotted in illusion. The one who swore he could escape the clinches. Who is that entangles him? It's wenches. And fain resist their lush authority. Before him stands his own dependency. He harked the 10 Commandments, trod the tried and true, would godly be and golden rule obey. For lunch he ate frugally a grape or two, survived on one pure thought a day. He screamed, I've mastered it, without half trying. Appears the moon, and once again he's lying. Idiots. All of them.
Welcome back. You're listening to Music for the Global Intifada on 3CR 855 AM. Today we are celebrating International Horse Day early. The day, which falls annually on the 2nd of June, is of course the theme of today's show. You just heard The Ballad of Sexual Dependency by the anti-fascist, self-described Rent Boys, the Anarchos, featuring Lydia Lunch. Up next is a brilliant spoken word piece by Dr. Ali Murray, exploring her experiences of sex work in the Block M area of Jakarta in the 1980s.
This is my epic poem. It's called Terminal Block M, and it's about working in the bars in Jakarta. Terminal Block M, staying out, hanging round, fucking pointless trip all night. But it's alright when you make a point of it, when it's dark outside, when it's dark inside. It's like a graveyard, say the craving girls, saving their smiles and dreaming as they dance alone of an all-accompanied cab ride home. I can't stop loving you, and life is terminal, dreams are short. Another Block M Saturday night. And the rules are we don't cross the boss, we don't say no, 'cause it's his show. We don't want any backstreet stabbing. We take this shit 'cause he pulls the strings and there's nowhere else to go. The boss's man, Sangkuriang, he keeps the piss with a heavy hand. Talking of visions in the jungle, he should be a fucking intellectual. Outside on a broken banana box over the shit-full gutter, hollow-eyed women sell fruit and mutter. at drug dealers, pimps and extortionists, parking men, beggars and piss artists, watching the hungry ghosts arrive in their Mersey Benz and their four-wheel drives, and the wish-fulfilling wasting girls from narrow gangland rooms, butterflies from the ghetto flying to the light. Sometimes they don't come back. They find their dream. They move along to a beautiful pea green complex. Sometimes they come back after a while, tripping back into gangland with suitcase in hand, tripping over their heels, wishful eyes full of tears. Gangland room with bed just fits, the smiling girl with John and snaps, a poster of Mick Jagger, a tatty English grammar, some uppers and some downers, a large important suitcase, the proud stiletto bearer that's been from hell to there and back and only half unpacked. Meanwhile, it's how you look when you play the game. Coco Cross so cool to have her name put up for pool. Jealous girls look and nudge and snort and say she's a dag who still can't write. She knows they know, she doesn't care. They write her letters to John back there. Her son will soon be going to school, and when she's on, she plays mean pool. Nurlela, Nurlela, Nurlela. Teased red hair and long red claws, teasing eyes, a rack-attack voice, thin like a sardine stick, struts her stuff in her raggy old jeans with a Rolling Stones tongue sewn on the bum, waiting on a friend, laughing money from a stone and strutting out to score. Revolving wheels, intriguing deals, all spokes lead to Block M calling. Appalling intrigue, it's our life, it keeps us busy, makes us laugh. Who's with who and who said what and who's back from the dead and who is not, and look at her, she's lost the plot. Strangely paranoid plastic fruit bobbing on her head, living oblivious nodding doll. Happy auntie wearing flares, village girls in pantic pairs. True but strange in purple day glow. Wake me up before you go. Bodies desired, brains derided. Up to you. No problem. Gotta take a chance. Life is like a dance. Gotta make the choice. Listen to the voice of the black dove calling. Forget the chores, the social mores. Sell one thing and buy another. Hello, Mr. Motherfucker. Outcast cast of actress deviants, ruffling feathers in the breeze. Nurlela is staying home, painting her toenails black, waving a foot laconically, smoking and drinking and watching TV, waiting on her man in Company B, stress complex, defended by sentries and roadblocks. Don't let no riffraff in, only the rich and their four-wheel drives, AC and VD and contract wives, fabulous, sexy, complex lives. Big bellies, tiny mouths. A big fat man sits at the bar, the biggest man I ever saw. I have to sort of squeeze or past. Sorry, he says. People are dancing and I don't know them. All of them know me. I just stand there having got there. Howdy, yells over Millie the Willie. So, hi, I say, raising an eyebrow in a practiced, unseductive way. And so we fell to talking. His jealous girl jumped small and cross, a painted eye between her eyebrows. Gosh, I said, please don't be cross. I'm practicing my English. Oh, she says and hugs my neck. I can't stop loving you. My name is Hula and I come from hell. And she orders me a collar on the fat man's bill. Nurlela sits at her post, 6 months gone and fading fast. But Saturday night, who wants to drag their headache home to roaches and rats? So Nurlela sits at her post, singing her silent song from Solo in Stiletto. It goes, another gold chain around my neck, another French perfume on my shelf, American flags hang off my wall, more half-cousins hang off my miniskirt. Same old drag queen moans about the rent. Same stupid argument never seems to end. Another dead finger around my neck. The barman pours another round. It costs more than his weekly wage. His eyes sink further in his head. They call him over like a dog. Every night they shut and brawl. He has to watch and serve and crawl. Outside, a ragamuffin sleeps on the sidewalk, not like a prawn, but spread out, sprawled like a sacrifice, with burnished skin painted yellow by the street lamp, and garlanded around with flowers made from rags of plastic bags and pieces of old thong. And here come the party girls, hot to trot, Mimi and Noni and Oki and Pony. They giggle and flirt and bounce a lot off their faces, money to burn from a dusty Block M afternoon, sucking off middle-class businessmen with their high school uniforms on. Experimental girls just having fun, they giggle and bounce their bows undone, while morphine girls and abortion queens, strapped up arms and tattooed dreams, acid burns and sold-out screams, loved and hated, mutilated, beautiful eyes and nice pale skin, plastic tits and a nice big dick. And Lola's flying off to the States as soon as John can send a fare. See, here's his letter in her purse. You signed it me before. It's later than we think. When every other club is shut, the gilded Egyptian queen arrives, tripping over her beaded gown in a perfect mask of makeup that slightly missed her features, like a badly registered coloured page in a glossy magazine. And she giggles with her glistening mouth, with a 10,000-year-old emptiness in her out-of-focus eyes. Tricks and fights, living days and wasted nights. Girl, I'm gonna miss you. All accompanied bellies leaving, ex-cop rapists at the bar. Action, accident, trivial and tragic, red and black magic, blood and shit and hellbound traffic, pumping bassline, sirens blaring, accident, action, everyone staring, people dying, no one caring. Nulela is staying home full of pride in her newborn child. She'd worried that it might be black, but a white girl's soul had found her womb, and she's the perfect baby. Meanwhile, on a broken banana box over a shipful gutter, the hollow-eyed women hold their nose and mutter, waiting on John and his lousy 15 cents for a small soft mangosteen. Hey la, come on. More songs about black magic. Faithful girls with golden slivers in their cheeks and in their asses going to secret magic classes. Rips of palm leaves and pumpkin grasses. Learning powers of fetal attraction. Sometimes accidents, always action. Fighting off each other's curses with magic in their gloamish purses. Bringing snakes into the nest, but the boss is not impressed. He chops the snake's heads off. Sankuriang is vast and drunk, bloated and beached in Block M forever, nursing his poor sore head with one hand, stopping a fight with the other. Talking of poems and philosophy, trying out the new girl's form, filling his task here every night, before the ragamuffins crow the dawn. Block M dreams, terminal cruising. Drift in, drift out, hang around for a bruising. Kick on, kick off, and scratch and smack. Get up, get down, keep coming back. Nulela and hula and gel, waiting on a bus to hell. Unkind rain that makes them gasp, laughing through their striping masks. Sheltering under a broken store, breaking a sleeping prophet's fall, waiting on a hell bus full of vegetable sellers and chickens squawking and gawking and hawking and Sunday morning.
That's what's nice about it. You don't have to feel anything. You don't have to care about anything. You don't have to like anybody. You just lead them by the ring in their nose in the direction that they think they want to go in. You get a lot of money out of them in as short a period of time as possible, and you control it and you call the shots. And I always feel just great afterwards.
How am I okay without inside of me? How am I
That last track was Graveyard of Love by Horo Vacui or Lana Death Ray. That track mocks the revulsion certain sectors of the broader community feel in relation to having sex with an anonymous paying mug. To finish today's show, we are leaving you with another spoken word piece, Manifesto of the Prostitutes War Collective.
Manifesto of the Prostitutes War Group. We are the whores of the worst nightmare of the shitstorm. PWG is an internationalist collective of anarchist, revolutionary, queer, insurrectionist prostitutes, rising up to realise our power, using our professional illegalist skills to sabotage our ideological enemies. We will disarm and ultimately destroy those who perpetuate the social war against us. War that is inherent in the fascistic, capitalistic shitstoms imposed on us. They try to render us powerless conformists through their sick perversions of Judeo-Christian morality, law and order, and justice that only serve to emotionally, spiritually, and physically rape us. Malapropisms. 1. Some purported anarchists believe prostitutes to be exploited within a standard, superficial, gendered framework. We reject this. We are utter transgressives and iconoclasts. There are no binaries, only the maximal fluidity of gender and sexuality which we gloss as queer. We intrinsically reject and transgress all the norms of culture, law, religion, capital that only serve to oppress us and channel power and wealth to the same sad, sick, stunted elite men who beg for our sexual succour. 2. Prostitution is commonly rendered as an inherently apolitical profession. A crippling steel-clad boot in the bollocks to that assertion. As anti-workerists, we believe in the formula least amount of labour for highest rates of pay. We have no interest in careerism or respectable, lowly paid employment. As avowed horizontalists, we find the narrative of the romanticised working class, i.e. happy but poor, noble proletarian, as deeply offensive as the enduring Orientalist myth of the noble savage. We fundraise on our own terms to enable our autonomy, the time and freedom to realise and unleash our own latent power and bestow solidarity on those we respect in their offensive actions against systemic control. We reject so-called labour rights and the decriminalisation of prostitution demanded by state-funded sex worker groups and deem these efforts mere reformism. As prostitutes, we make more cash in hand in the grimy undergrowth than working for the legitimated boss. We revel in our outlaw criminal status. Therefore, we have no desire to reform the system. We are dedicated to its total destruction. Prostitutes have unique access to the elite. The industrialists, maggot straights, our fine representative politicians, religious leaders, the ultra-rich and their lackeys in the filth. Those who urgently press their grubby money on us out of a pathetic desire for affirmation as an antidote to their miserable lives. And thereby, we have the power to wreak terror and humiliation upon them. We are uniquely placed to expose their hypocrisy and pathetic predilections. When they pay us to shit on their faces, we take so much more pleasure in that act than their insulated, retarded emotional responses could comprehend. Under our saccharine smiles and fiend delight, we are watching, waiting for our moment to strike, to humiliate, to expose and torture those who are directly complicit in perpetuating the systems of state control, fascistic, capitalistic repression and social law. We covertly, creatively unleash our rage. Taste our war, scumbags. We hereby urge our queer and gender fluid whore comrades across the globe to further the insurrectionist wet dream. No offensive action is too taboo in realising sabotage of those who would deem themselves our masters and the foot soldiers who perpetuate the social war. We advocate thieving, drugging, kidnap, intelligence gathering, assassinations, public exposure and corrupting their children. We will share our successes under the banner of the Prostitutes War Group. Communiques will follow thicker and quicker than a horny corrupt cop. In solidarity with all anarcho-whore saboteurs fighting the social war through whatever unconventional and direct means are at our disposal. Avante Prostitutes War Group. No retreat, no surrender until the last pig is strung up with the blood-spattered tie of the last industrialist. Viva la puta!